say, the main marketplace of Cologne. Behind me there's a fountain which tells a story from the 30-year war. If you don't know, around 1700 there was a 30-year war in Germany where mainly the Catholic fought against the Protestants, but there were a lot of reasons why everyone fought against everyone, and it just took 30 years of war at each side, everywhere, everyone against everyone, and Cologne was always in the middle of it. So Cologne was always on one side, on the other side, and sometimes it just didn't know on which side. Sometimes there were fights in Cologne, whatever. So the fountain tells the story of this time, like a legend. It's told in Cologne, and it tells the story of Jan von Werth. That's the guy on the top of the fountain. And this Jan von Werth, he was in love with Grit, the flower girl Grit, who sold flowers here on the medieval marketplace, and Grit was the most beautiful girl in town. The problem was she knew she was the most beautiful girl in town. So one day when Jan, who was in love with Grit, came to her and asked for her hand in marriage and told everyone on the whole marketplace how in love he was, she just laughed at him and told him to fuck off, and she didn't accept because he was poor, he was a no one, and she knew she was the most beautiful girl in town, and if she wanted to marry, then only the richest, the most powerful man she could have, and that was not Jan von Werth. So he was really, really unhappy and wanted to kill himself. But as a Catholic, you can't kill yourself, that's one of the death sins. So he did the next best thing, he joined the army. There was a 30-year war, that's a really safe thing, safe plan to kill yourself. So he was in the army, and at every chance he just went for the cannons. Always in the first line, always the first through every door. But for some reason he just wasn't hit. Never. So he was known for his bravery and what a guy, and he was the best and everyone loved him. And in the time of 10 years he was promoted and promoted again, and one day he was a general in the army. And that was one time when Cologne was again under siege, and he came with his army and freed Cologne from whatever enemy at this time was here. And the Cologne people were really thankful, and they started to give him a parade through the whole city. He, on his horse, in front of his whole army, was riding through the city to this marketplace where the flower girl Grit still was selling her flowers, because no man was powerful and rich and good enough for her. Now she's 10 years older, maybe not the most beautiful girl in town anymore, but she sees Jan on his horse, in his big general outfit, whatever, and he comes through to him and just begs in front of his horse now. Okay, now is the time, we could marry, I'm ready now, let's just get married. And he laughed at her because he just says, no, not now anymore. And she just, yeah, but had I known. But he just writes on. In the story, he just gives her one money ounce, whatever it was at the time. And she never sees him again. And that's, in Cologne, it's like a story of everyone can rise up, and you shouldn't be so mean to everyone. So now you see the woman in front of this fountain. That's Grit, the former flower girl, and she had this hand hold like this. At the moment, I think there's a beer bottle in it. Every year, especially on Carnival, she gets a beer bottle or wine bottle in there, and she's known as the first drinker of Cologne. Okay, now we just see at this tower here, you can see the little wooden face under the clock.
Yeah.
at the moment, because at every full hour it does that, it shows you his tongue. And that is a sign because this tower was built 1411 by the citizens of Cologne. You have to know the citizens of Cologne always were really proud and really independent. And again they just kicked out their rulers, mostly church rulers, mostly bishops. They were just kicked out of the city, had to go in exile because the Cologne citizens, the merchants, the craft workers, they were so independent and proud. They thought they could rule themselves. So they built in 1411 this tower just to show everyone they could rule themselves, and that was the new house, public house for everyone. It only took around 20 years that they ruled themselves because, like I said before, bribery and nepotism was really big in Cologne, and it never worked out. But these proud people, always against the rulers, against the higher ups, built this tower with this guy who always takes out his tongue at every full hour in direction of the church St. Martin we saw before, just to show them that they are better and they are cooler than every church bishop can rule the city. This tower was destroyed in the Second World War, but it was built up again with all these statues on the sides. There are 124 statues. When they built it up again after the Second World War, it was not known who exactly were all these statue people who were there before. So the Colognes just built new ones with all the big figures of the Cologne history. So on the bottom there are all the Romans like Agrippina I told you about, and the higher up you get, the more common and more today people are on there. For example, Konrad Adenauer, who was one of the presidents of Germany and also born in the city, is on this tower. And on the top there are the holy Colognians. So Cologne has 4 city holies. These are first and foremost the 3 holy kings I told you about, because we have the bones and everything. And the 4th is Ursula the Brave. There's a story about Ursula, which is also seen on our flag of Cologne, which is now at the moment not to see because it's not really windy, but on the really first flag over here you can see normally this sign, this emblem of the Cologne city. And you have the 3 holy kings. You have white and red because that are the colors of the Hanseatic Union I told you about. And then you have these 11 flames or tears, whatever, no one's really sure if it's flames or tears. But these are the sign of Ursula the Brave. Ursula was an English princess and she was forced to marry because of political reasons. Her father forced her to marry a pagan who was always at war with the English people. And she said simply no. So she said, no, I'm not marrying anyone who's not Christian, who lives in sin. And if I have to marry him, I want 1 year time so that he can become Christian, and I have the time to take a ship to the Pope in Italy and ask if it's okay for me to marry this man. And her father allowed it, which is crazy for the time that a princess had the authority to ask such a big thing. But her father allowed it, and she went on the ship with her 11 best friends, the 11 virgins in the story. The Cologne say it's the first bachelorette party known in history, so they all took a ship, came down the River Rhine and wanted to go to Italy. But a year is a long time, so they just stayed for 2 months here in Cologne and just had a bit of party. She fell in love with the city of Cologne, and after a time they had to move on. They went to Italy, they met the Pope, everything was fine. But when they came back, Cologne was under siege by the Huns. So Ursula, who loved the city now, didn't want to just sail on and go back to England. She came here to Cologne, came on land, and she went into the Hun settlement on the other riverside to negotiate with the Huns if they were maybe if it was possible to just move on and leave Cologne alone. But the Han leader saw how beautiful Ursula was and wanted to marry her. And she had again the same problem. She said she didn't want to marry a pagan, no non-believer. She just had the same problem with the other guy, so she said no. And the Han leader killed her and her 11 virgins, friends, whatever. They all were killed and thrown in the Rhine. The people of Cologne pulled them out on the other side and brought them to the city. And with a big parade, like we say today, because they were known for their bravery, they were martyrs and everything. And in the night after they were killed, the legend says the ghosts of Ursula and her 11 friends showed up on the walls of the city and gave the Cologne soldiers so much bravery that on the next morning they were able to win over the Huns. That's the legend. How much truth is there, no one knows. But it's medieval times and the Cologne people believe everything. And also they are really, really good merchants. And it's a time of reliquien. So every time you sell something from someone holy, you could sell it for a really, really good price. So the Cologne merchants thought, oh, that's perfect. Ursula, she's basically a martyr, and her 11 virgins as well. So they started to sell little bone splinters or like little wooden stuff and said, yeah, that's from Ursula and her 11 virgins, and it's really powerful, holy shit, you have to have it. And they sold just everything. So there were like animal bones and everything just sold as, ooh, that's a bone splinter of Ursula. But after a time, you know, there are only 12 bodies, you can't do it forever. But there were a few years in between, and in the written down version of this legend, there was written Ursula and her 11 M virgins, and M is the Roman sign for 1,000. So suddenly it was Ursula and her 11,000 virgins, and they started to sell everything. So the whole of Cologne was selling bone splinters and little wooden stuff from the clothes of Ursula and everything. And one day, a few years later, a man from the Pope, some Catholic sent person, no one knows, came to Cologne, and he just saw all the stuff, what was going on, and said, sorry, but that's not part of Catholic Church, we don't do that, please stop it. And the Cologne Council negotiated with him and said, okay, we stop it, we forbid to sell any bones or whatever, but you have to go to the Pope and make Ursula holy, so the Pope can just say something and then the person is holy. Don't know how it works, but it worked. So he went to the Pope, and suddenly Ursula was a holy person, and now she is the fourth holy city person, don't know. So next to the 3 kings, holy kings, there's also Ursula as our holy of the city, and she's also on top of this tower. That's it about the marketplace, the interesting stories. Or do you want to know something in particular about this market? Okay, then just let's move on.